Oh, hi, Ripley. Hey, bud. Well, hello. Ripley decided to assist with this video. Welcome back to Rebecca for a weekly chatty catch-up in a slightly odd setup. This is pretty much the only situation where there is a place to sit, and also, you can't see that there's just stuff everywhere. There's a glass tabletop right here, and it's chaos right now. I just got new flooring throughout my house, and so about 75% of my house was refloored, and all of my stuff is in the other 25% of the house, which is surrounding me. It's great. So that means I'm very not with it today. I have not got any mental clarity to share with you, really, but we're here. I think that's going to be the theme for the next little while, is I'm just going to be tired and not with it. I did actually start filming for mid-month book bash as well, and the couple clips, again, are probably just going to mostly be me saying how tired I am and how I can't focus at all. So I'm trying. I just want to catch up with you all on my week and what I read. I think I'm going to cap my what I read section to just a couple of things, because I don't want this to go on forever. So the first thing that I finished was You Are My Home by Debbie Burns. This is probably my favorite romance series for very biased reasons, because it is centered around characters at a rescue and dog rescue, as well as being set locally to my city. I'm pretty sure it's based on a real dog rescue that I actually know of. And this one, I think, cemented that for me, because there were some sort of connections that were mentioned there that definitely would link to that dog rescue. So anyway, in this one, we are following Riley and Levi, and we do have alternating perspectives. And over the course of this book, we are getting to know them as new characters for me to this series. I don't think either of them were characters who had been exposed in any of the previous books. This is the 7th in the series, but with this series, it's always new characters jumping in, so usually they'll kind of show up as a side character and then tie in with a romance. So this is contemporary romance, but low steam. I don't think there was anything on page here. It was pretty fade to black. The series has had varying levels of that. Some has been a little open door, but not very descriptive. This one was completely fade to black, so absolutely nothing in this particular book actually took place on page. However, I did really get behind the characters, because we are following Riley as she's just lost her job. She's kind of been running away from herself since high school, and over the course of the book, we of course find out that she and Levi had a terrible breakup, and they both kind of went their separate ways at the end of high school, and both of them were sort of looking to escape. And now she's coming back because she's lost her job. She's staying with her family temporarily because her mom has recently been diagnosed with cancer and is undergoing treatment, so she kind of wants to be around, and she doesn't really know what her next steps are. And of course, right away, she remembers volunteering at the dog shelter and decides to go for a run and go by there and see if she can start volunteering there again. And she, when she gets there, discovers a dog tied up outside right before they're getting ready to open. And so she takes the dog in and, has a strong connection with this dog, and it's so sweet. And it's a big Great Dane. But of course, she's staying with her family. Her mom rescues cats and has collected strays, so she's never been able to have a dog, and that was why she always had this connection with volunteering with the dog shelter. So naturally, they wholeheartedly welcome her back to the volunteering role, but they also happen to be in need of a media manager, and that is something she has a background in. So she agrees to temporarily take that role on in the interim while they're waiting for someone who's doing an internship elsewhere to finish up that job and come in and be their new hire in a few months. So along the side of that, we have Levi, who is a diver professionally, lives somewhere in the Great Lakes region, but he's recently had a horrible injury, and he likewise now finds himself sort of unmoored because he can't go back to diving. He had a concussion and head injury, puts him at major risk. He'll never be insurable. So he doesn't know what his future holds either, and finds himself back in St. Louis as well in order to set up with his friend, who has a sort of side connection as a dog boarding business out in the countryside that naturally connects with the dog rescue. So there is that sort of tie-in immediately, and I love that it wasn't set up so that they both know that each other are there. They sort of have happenstance throws them together, and I love that setup. So this is a, I guess, exes to lovers type of romance, if that's a thing. I don't know, I don't really hear about that. They clearly have all these emotions for each other that have already been built up. They were high school sweethearts who everyone thought were going to stay together forever, and then they just kind of went their separate ways after a terrible breakup. And so I loved seeing them come back together. However, this was the least kind of meaty of the stories. It felt very surface level. I think both of these characters had a lot going on, had heavy elements in their lives, but those weren't explored very much, or as much as I liked. It was a fun romance. I enjoyed reading it, and I certainly won't regret that I read it, but it wasn't super memorable. This one also kind of got downgraded because the editing was pretty bad. Not in that there was anything egregious, but there were numerous examples of words that were the wrong word or wrong tense of a word. Nothing that was like totally misspelled, but there were a lot of incorrect word usage here. So that really stood out to me and was not up to par with previous books in the series. However, I'm still, of course, very, very happy that I read it. As I said, this is the 7th in the series. I sort of skipped over a couple, so I have 2 in the middle still to read, but I'm very happy to be keeping up because this just came out this year. Then I read Going Infinite by Michael Lewis, and that one is very hotly debated, I would say. I don't know what to say about it without prefacing that there are a huge number of negative reviews sort of blaming Michael Lewis, saying that he's somehow, I don't know, complicit with Sam Bankman-Fried, who is the target of this book. It's all about crypto bros, Bitcoin, and all of the sort of underhanded things that Sam did, were, whether those were intentional or not, and his personality, what led him to kind of a big blow up of his business, FTX. So I think I took issue with the negative responses to this because Michael Lewis is a really skilled writer. He's a journalistic nonfiction author who has written in the financial markets space before with The Big Short, Flash Boys, I think. He's had a couple of things that tie those elements in. And he talks through that very well and clearly for a non-expert audience, I think. That is my professional field. I work in financial market data technologies and sort of a very narrow niche. So I'm not the lay reader probably on this topic, but I think he does absolutely explain these topics really well. And so for me, him doing that here and explaining a really complex financial market topic for a lay reader works. And that makes this a successful book. Other people seem to think that because he is sympathetic to Sam Bankman-Fried, that's inherently bad. And I don't think that's the case. I think that even shows why Bankman-Fried was actually successful at what he was. It reminded me very much of Bad Blood, the sort of story of Theranos and how that was mostly trickery, but perhaps Elizabeth Holmes actually did really believe and was kind of narcissistic in thinking she was going to do this crazy, wild, amazing thing. From the very first 2 opening sections of this book, we get Lewis's own first impression, sort of, where he's been asked by someone what his thoughts of Sam are on initially meeting him. And he goes kind of all in, very positive. The second is from one of the employees of Bankman-Fried, and she also is overwhelmingly positive, but littered throughout are how grandiose and strange his way of looking at the world is. He very much comes across with red flags. To me, immediately on reading both of those first 2 chapters, I was like, this is either narcissism or mania. Like, not to diagnose someone, but like textbook, it reads that way. So I was sort of shocked that that wasn't like throwing up red flags for these people. He is also extremely on-page, non-neurotypical. Like it's never stated sort of what variety, but it is clear he does not approach the world or process the world in a neurotypical way whatsoever. And he's not particularly charismatic, yet he's constantly convincing people of these things. I would say I can't think of her last name, but Anna, Inventing Anna was the TV series adaptation of the woman, Anna, who sort of faked her whole life and took millions of dollars from people and just sort of was very convincing. She was not super charismatic either, but she convinced people that she could or had all of this money behind her and that they should trust her with their money. And that is sort of what happened here. He's abrupt, he's abrasive, but he seemed to convince people that he knew what he was talking about and that he was onto something very genuine that really was going to net them money. And I think that was portrayed in a way that really made sense. The areas of his childhood and background and how he got there, his very obtuse way of approaching the world, were the strengths here. I think for me, I do wish it had gone even further into the general topic of crypto bros. It certainly talks about, at brief points, sort of what the draw is there. Like, what is a crypto bro and how do they get there? The association with effective altruism and utilitarianism. Bankman-Fried and others like him very much tend to be in that mindset very strongly. So I think it explained through those topics and generally at a surface level really well, but didn't get the depth that I wanted. It also did not go into depth about the actual crypto and Bitcoin itself. It talked through general principles of trading that are relevant in a great deal of depth. And Bankman-Fried's experiences at a trading house before he went into crypto that sort of led him there, that was like the most fascinating part. I loved it. And that kind of made me interested to go reread The Big Short, because I remember that being fantastic. And this had those elements. So I feel like Michael Lewis sort of passed the buck on the crypto aspect because effectively it's a very complicated topic. And going into this book, I had been looking forward to see how is he going to make this digestible and easy to understand, because I know he's capable. And effectively he gives really, really brief, almost barely there explanation and just says, yeah, other people have already explained this really complicated topic better than I can, so you should go check out these other writers' work. So that was a disappointment. I'm completely skipping over giving us that thing that I thought he was going to do really well. So for me, this was interesting in that, you know, I think his sympathy for Bankman-Fried makes it very understandable why so many things go wrong in this scenario. I think it was shocking to me how much, like, just blatantly illegal things were going on, bad business practices, just terrible, and the lack of business sense in general. And yet people were continually throwing money at these people. And because they were operating outside of the United States, there wasn't a lot of regulation or illegality held against them for a very long time. And so they could operate in that way without getting in trouble because they were not in a regulated area. Most of the stuff wouldn't happen, hopefully, or happens very under the radar in trading houses in the US. But that is exactly why cryptos operate overseas, you know? So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure professionally if I'm allowed to have any sort of opinion on cryptos, but if I were theoretically allowed to have a personal opinion, I think it would probably be that cryptos are generally awful. So this affirmed that, I think, mostly. Yeah, it was a good read, but kind of a disappointment from Michael Lewis in general as not a standout work, but I think he made this topic very easy to read and consumable for sure. Then I read the book Normal, and I need to look up the subtitle. Okay, so the subtitle of this one, this is Normal, Transsexual CEOs, Cross-Dressing Cops, and Hermaphrodites with Attitude by Amy Bloom. So Amy Bloom is also a journalistic nonfiction writer. I think she may have actually written something fiction as well, but primarily nonfiction. And the topic is as it sounds like. I also have to contextualize this book, much like the last, in there being, again, a huge amount of very negative and sort of minimizing reviews about this that kind of are scathingly saying it's problematic. This is a 20-year-old book, though, so certainly the terminology that's used is not the same. A lot of terminology and usage has changed over those 20 years. This is a very fast-moving topic, and for me, I think that Amy Bloom actually handled these things quite well in the context of the time. But I also think if you can't read this in that context as a time capsule of what things were happening at the time, you might not have an enjoyable reading experience with this. Certainly, she does things that are very cringe if you're reading them from today's perspective, which you are. And I think it's clear to me that she went in very genuine and well-intentioned and comes across as really truly caring about doing this. She is stepping out there into a space where these sort of non-traditional gender identities were not talked about, period. The only likely interaction or evidence of their existence that the average person would be aware of was in extreme circumstances on trashy talk shows. That was pretty much it. No one was talking about it out in the open in public. And she is admitting that she doesn't know, and she is interested and curious and seeking out to put herself in uncomfortable situations and have conversations and get to know these people. And she does do that. She does that with people she agrees or disagrees with. She puts it all out on the page, and at times even, does show, she lays it all out there, really. Even when she knows she's showing something that maybe is not great, that she's done or thought. She's giving us her thought process as she's going through these experiences of, even telling us as she's sitting in a waiting room, maybe I shouldn't be thinking this, but this is actually what I'm thinking. And I think that was true to the journalistic integrity of this project. At many, many, many points throughout this, I was surprised, especially given, the negative comments in reviews about this, that she is more progressive thinking than many of the medical professionals who have dedicated their lives to treating the individuals that are being discussed here. So, as the subtitle sort of specifies, we do begin with trans individuals. At the time it was being discussed as transsexual, and those people in context here would be what we would now call transgender. And I think that she does try to show the disparity between the medical profession, who views it largely as a physical aspect, whereas the actual community of trans individuals are talking about how it is more than that. It goes beyond. And I really thought she was very forward thinking and beyond what was accessible at the time. She sought out personal interviews with individuals who either didn't want to be named or would be named, and actually, sought out people who maybe weren't open about their identity with the people around them. And I think that was really, really great to get those perspectives, because at the time, these people, even their most beloved family or friends weren't aware of who they were. And for them, that was sort of hiding a piece of themselves. So I thought that conversation was really fantastic. But for me, the second and third parts were the strongest. And so in the second part, Bloom tackles cross-dressing. And I was very intrigued, I guess. Unaware, I would say. I was not aware at the time. She is citing a differentiation in actual written text. So this is not her opinion. But at the time, there was a separation between cross-dressing, which was effectively, for the most part, straight people dressing as the opposite gender or another gender, versus drag being a public display by someone who's gay. And so that is now an odd distinction that I don't think anyone would use. As far as I'm aware, I'm not an expert, again, on that, but I don't think that is the current usage of those terms whatsoever. And so, again, it's really interesting to see the changes, how much has happened in the 20 years and how much more fluid, because at the time it was very solid delineation based on the documentation that she was looking at. We also are getting those perspectives from individuals who are cross-dressing, but they're very conservative. So it mentions cops. We specifically, in some cases, are talking about conservative, very right-wing people who are in their private lives secretly doing this. And the medical profession, again, delineated it as sort of a sexual thing, whereas the people involved talk about it as, again, something more. They're talking about how they're more whole as people. Even these extreme right-wing individuals are talking about how it makes them better as a person, because men are engaging with both their masculine and feminine side. But they're doing it so in secret. And I think Bloom does a great job of having empathy, but also getting across how sad that is, that they feel like they can't be out in public or live openly in this way. They have to hide a part of themselves. And she also, in many cases, talks to and sympathizes with their wives who are going through something they didn't sign up for and are effectively kind of getting lost alongside, where their husbands are engaged in this thing and sort of excited about this thing that they can't be included in. And so that was an interesting aspect to incorporate. I did think that, again, the empathy from her at all sides with everyone that she engaged with and the attempts to genuinely hear what people are saying about their experiences was fascinating. And then the final part here was intersex individuals. And this was the most impactful for me, because I think that it showed me how much the underpinnings of decisions that have been made about how people are enabled to express gender, or choices that medicine has made about gender and sexuality, have been framed extremely by homophobia. And part of the background of intersex individuals is that people would have surgical decisions made for them in infancy about who they were going to be from a sex and gender perspective, without concern for who they would be as a future adult, as someone with their own identity, with their own sexuality. And everything was about adhering to a norm, and instead of considering that they might want some input into that. And it reminded me a little bit of reading White Too Long by Robert Jones, I think. In that book, it's a totally different topic. It's talking about the backgrounds of white supremacy in the Christian church in America. In that book, it's talking through how much racism and white supremacy had an underpinning in the interpretations of the Bible in the American Christian church. And how can, once that foundation has been laid, how can you separate that? You truly can't. So much about how biblical interpretation happened over the course of a couple hundred years had the underpinnings there. So very similarly, so much about medicine has underpinnings in these homophobic decisions, and just how much of that still is impacting us, even when they aren't overtly problematic decisions about how we choose to treat individuals medically, are all caught up in that foundation that has already been laid passively. And it made me think about so many different things to do with medicine and the lack of treatment, and the current issues that we have going on right now with states attempting to control people's decisions about their gender and sexuality when it comes to medical decisions. And some of these stories were very hopeful and wonderful in terms of intersex individuals sort of getting what they want, and other ones were really heartbreaking about people being sort of denied their identity. And I think that was the most forward of its time, acknowledging that intersex identities were more common, that experience was more typical and wasn't really respected by their parents or medical professionals. And it slowly is coming into normalcy or acceptance. But even today, it still feels like that is something that is really behind where it should be. So I feel like I learned a lot from that, even though it is, 20 years old. I think there was so much to take away from that and think about. So I've rambled forever. And that's why I said I was going to cap the books I'm talking about. Because I really enjoyed this. I think it was a great book, but it is of its time. And you are going to see Amy Bloom do really uncomfortable things, say uncomfortable things when she's talking to people, but she is putting herself out there out of a genuine desire to educate herself. And I think she wrote this book in very good faith, as far as I can see. So I enjoyed that one. I did also finish Starling House by Alexi Harrow, but I'm going to save that for next week because that's going to be a whole nother long talk. And actually, one of the books I'm reading right now, Revelator by Darryl Gregory, has some very strong similarities. So I may wrap those up together or do a separate review video for those two on their own, because they're both kind of Southern Gothic-y. And I enjoyed Starling House very, very much. So spoiler for my chat, I really liked it. And Revelator so far is lining up to be similar. I'm really enjoying it. So I think that's it for all of that stuff. As far as other books I'm working on, I think the only one that I'm actively progressing right now is Sure, I'll Join Your Cult by Maria Bamford. I think that's it for all of that stuff. I can't remember what all I said up front other than I got reflooring done of most of my house. So it's just chaos right now, and that is about all there is to my days currently. I still have so much stuff to get moved back out. I don't have an oven or stove right at the moment, so we will see if I can cook. If I can cook tomorrow, if I get things moved back, or if I'm just not feeling like it. I'm covered in bruises, and both my wrists are like totally swollen up with arthritis because of the strain on everything. So I'm hopeful I will just be able to slowly start chipping away at getting things back to normal. And I have been today, but it has really worn me out. So who knows if I will edit this today. It will go up whenever it goes up. But I do thank you very much for being here for this insane ramble of incoherence. Thanks so much for watching.